everyone, my name is Erica Garcia, and today I'm going to be presenting on the topic of Lincoln and his views on racial equality. Now, this is a really important topic for someone to study because basically everything he did was important and obviously led to bigger things, but his views on equality were what led to the Emancipation Proclamation, because you wouldn't have someone who didn't want to free the slaves freeing slaves. These are important things to know. That's why this is such an important topic. And to start off on, where I think Lincoln fits in the spectrum of egalitarian versus, a racist, really, I drew a little spectrum to show you. So on one end, we have egalitarian. That is 100% for equality. They want to free the slaves, they want to stop slavery, and then they want blacks and whites to be equal, Pretty. And then on the other end, we have racists, okay? We have white supremacists. We have people who would show these tendencies because we say it as it's a bad thing because it is, but in the time that Lincoln was in, this was the norm over here, not over here. So this was the norm for Lincoln. And so to put him in the middle is actually pretty amazing because he was different for his time, and we'll see that as we go further in this presentation. So to start, I read George Fredrickson and his article, A Man But Not a Brother. And in this article, it talked about how Lincoln got most of his views from Henry Clay, who believed in colonization. He wanted to stop slavery. He wanted to completely abolish slavery, not only stop it from expanding. So his plan after, he abolished slavery was to move all of the black people out of the United States because he didn't want equality. Lincoln did adopt these views, and that's what George Fredrickson talks about, that Lincoln he did not want equality, but he also wanted to free the slaves. So the reason this arrow is pointing more towards this way is because Fredrickson didn't really talk about all of the other levels of society that you can consider someone equal in. So that's why his is leaning a little bit more towards this, but still talking about how Lincoln is right in the middle. The next article that I read was by David Lightner, yes, and it was called Abraham Lincoln and the Ideal of Equality. Basically, in he talked about how Lincoln is on the other end of the spectrum because Lincoln follows Thomas Jefferson instead of Henry Clay. Now, Thomas Jefferson, as we all know, is the author of the Declaration of Independence. And in the Declaration of Independence, it clearly states all men are created equal. Now, Abraham Lincoln believed heavily in historical documents. So when he has a historical document sitting right here telling him all men are equal, and in his mind he's saying, well, blacks are men. So therefore, he said, slavery is just wrong. It's taking away all of the rights of men, and he's saying that it's not only is it not making them equal, that it is completely wrong. So according to Lightner, Lincoln wanted to stop slavery from expanding. He wanted to abolish slavery, and he wanted equality a little bit. So Lightner is leaning more towards this way, but still putting Lincoln right in the middle of not being completely one-sided. Now, Oakes, on the other hand, goes a little bit more in depth than his. So James Oakes wrote the article, Our Lincoln, New Perspectives on Lincoln and His World. I really liked this article. Actually, it was very thorough in what it talked about, and it talked about how there are different levels of basically society. So you have natural rights, you have citizenship rights, and then you have state rights. So for Oakes, Lincoln basically showed different levels of either egalitarian or racism on the different levels. Natural rights come from the Declaration of Independence. These are the rights given to men. If you acknowledge that someone is a man, then they are given these rights. And slavery was an institution that was completely disregarding all of the rights of man. It's life, liberty, and property at the time, but pursuit of happiness. And you're taking away someone's liberty if you're holding them as a slave. So for Oakes, on the level of natural rights, Lincoln was completely on this end of the spectrum because, I mean, it was breaking all of the natural rights. The next level was citizenship rights. This one is foggy because at the time there was no distinction as to what made someone a citizen of the United States. I mean, different states had their own, like, you have to do this to be a citizen. But for the nation, I mean, they really didn't have a lot of immigrants coming in at the time, and it wasn't an issue at the forefront of everyone's mind to think of what made someone a citizen. So to give blacks citizenship rights would mean not only acknowledging that they are a man, but acknowledging that they are a citizen of the United States. There is nothing clearly stating that they are not citizens and that they cannot be citizens. And this is pointed out many times in James Oakes' article. And that's why I really liked it, because it was very thorough about different people coming in and saying, well, yeah, there's nothing listed saying that they're not citizens and that they can't be citizens. And so Lincoln ended up swaying more towards this. They are citizens, and they should have the citizenship rights. State rights, Lincoln knew his place. Lincoln knew he was the national head of everything, but that he wasn't the states. Like, he didn't have control over what the single states did in some aspects. So he didn't really touch on state rights. But this kind of points him in this direction because he knew that the states would not give them the rights that everyone else had. Because at the time, this was the vast majority, that was their viewpoint. So by basically disregarding anything having to do with state rights, he kind of leans towards this way. But again, this is putting Lincoln right in the middle because, I mean, he shows a little bit of both. And the last article I read was Don, I think his last name is pronounced Fehrenbacher, and it was called Only His Stepchildren. Now, in this one, he was saying very similar things to Oakes in saying that Lincoln did not want slavery. He wanted to abolish slavery. He didn't want it to expand. Nothing to do with slavery. But he also didn't want equality. And basically, Fehrenbacher is saying that Lincoln, he didn't want his sons to marry a black woman, for instance. He didn't want that sort of equality, but he wasn't going to go as far as saying they aren't a man. Obviously, that was very obvious in all of the articles. He acknowledged that the freed black slaves were men. So that gave them the natural rights. He did acknowledge that in Fehrenbacher's article. And basically, my conclusion from all of this is that Lincoln is right in the middle because he shows characteristics from both ends, which is amazing for his time when everyone was over here. Lincoln obviously did not want slavery. He did not want it to expand. He didn't want it to exist in the areas that it did. He had different approaches. Maybe he wanted colonization. We can't be sure. And basically, with him being in the middle, it allowed him to, be seen on both ends. So both ends could like him and could vote him into office, and he could do the things that he did because he had the people backing him. And that's how he was able to get the Emancipation Proclamation, because you can't put something in place and expect everyone to follow it if nobody wants it. He wouldn't be able to do anything without the people, and he knew that. So that is why I think Lincoln is right in the middle on his views on racial equality. Thank you.